Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. I'm back with another Inside the Scope edition, a topic I'm very passionate about. I covered last time Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor, and this is kind of in that same mold. Uh, this album that I'm about to cover is an album that I discovered around the same time I discovered the Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor album, which was my freshman year in college at Tennessee State. Looking for books at the bookstore. I stumbled upon some CDs back when you could still do that. And I found Common's B album, BE. Now, this is, along with that Lupe album, was my introduction into the backpack rap. I was used to listen to classic hip hop or gangster rap, but these albums, like the Lupe and the Common, those albums gave more introspective hip hop, more conscious rap, more um, intricate raps, so to speak. And this album changed hip hop for me, and I kind of fell in love from hip hop off Lupe's album and Common's album. Coincidentally, two Chicago rappers that did this for me. But like I said, this was my introduction into backpack rap. Uh, you know, just going off hip hop and what it is genuinely. Hip hop is something that's supposed to kind of make you think outside the box, to question um, the existence of what it is right now, and to take you to that next level. And this album definitely did that. Now, a little background on this album. This album was after Common's Electric Circus album that a lot of people thought he went real left on, that he went away from his uh, his pureness from hip hop. They thought he was trying to appease to the masses. And this also was after his relationship and breakup with Erykah Badu. So it's a general, I guess you can kind of say, stigma around if you're dating Erykah Badu. A lot of people say, she changes you after you date her or when you're dating her. And this is kind of the start of that whole belief, because they did the same thing with Andre 3000 as well. He kind of changed his style and stuff after he dated Erykah Badu. But nevertheless, Electric Circus was an album that Common, fell off, or they thought he was over with. They thought that this was the end. That's the best we were ever going to see Common again. But fortunately for him, he hooked up with Kanye West, another Chicago native, and the production on the album was done mostly through Kanye West on this album, with the exception of just 2 tracks. And I'll get into that later. But like I said, most people wrote him off and they thought he was done for. But when he connected back with Kanye West and got a whole new sound, he got back to pure hip hop, into his genuine self. The Common that we know and love from I Used to Love Her and all those great tracks, Breaker 1-9 and all those things that he gave us before, he got back to his original form. And he even thanked Kanye West a lot for getting him back to who he was. Now, when you think about the album, so I ended up on the deluxe album, which was a little bit more pricier than the original. I don't even think they had the original. So it came with a DVD, and it gave you a lot of background and behind the scenes things about the album with Kanye West, and him just going him back to his old roots and finding himself again to make this album. And he felt like this album was going to be very special. He even did an interview with Sway on this deluxe album of B. And the interview was very interesting because, like I said, Sway is a legend in hip hop interviews and hip hop media. And he was able to ask questions I don't think most outlets would be able to ask. He asked him about his relationship with Erykah Badu. He asked him about the Electric Circus album. He even asked him about The Light, which is a song that many thought that would put him over the top, but it didn't put him over the top per se. I think it ended up going gold, but the record never went platinum up until that point when Sway had interviewed him. So he addressed a lot of things that people were saying about Common. And Common has a song on the album called They Say, where he addresses these things himself. A lot of things, what the media was saying and what people were saying behind his back. And he addressed those things, and Sway addressed them as well, giving you more introspection into the album, into the making of the album, which, made the audience, gravitate more towards the music, because you get the background and what he was thinking when he wrote these songs. So, like I said, this album changed the trajectory for Common. Even after this album, I believe he only did like 1 or 2 movies, but after this album, he just kept doing movies and TV shows, and he kind of blew up from just an artistry standpoint, and not just only in hip hop, but for general pop as well. He was doing movies with Queen Latifah, movies like Wanted with Angelina Jolie. He became this big public figure, and he was, started dating more women, and he just got very popular after this album. Just because I think it put him in a different light. I don't want to say the album just put him into the Hollywood world, but he got exposed to more things after the connection with Kanye, and he made all these different appearances, and it just changed his trajectory because he was going down from that Electric Circus stink, so to speak. But this is one of my favorite albums. Like I said, it's only 11 tracks, but it was masterful production, masterful rapping. It was that perfect marriage, like I always talks about. And in my opinion, it's the best album that Common has put out in his career. Now, his later works that came out, within the last 5 or 6 years, I haven't listened to as much because I see him more as an actor now. I've listened to some of the tracks, and he has some good tracks, but it's just not the same thing. Now, the recent one he just put out with Pete Rock is back to that form, but I think B is still better than any other piece of work he is putting out. Now, his best songs are still probably on other albums, but as far as this album goes, it was masterful from 1 to 11. And like I said, I like albums that are short and condensed like that. They get straight to the point. No skits, just a bunch of just straight rapping. And it was not too much rapping on the album. It was just a perfect thing. But going back to the album, my favorite track is Love, which is produced by Jay Dilla. Man, the song is amazing. It's like one of my favorite Common songs of all time because he gets down to the nitty gritty and he's so honest on the song. He talks about being from Chicago, but at the same time being a human and being a lover and being a person too, because a lot of times as men we have to mask those feelings. But he had a line in Love Is, produced by Jay Dilla, where he says, seen the hardest homies soften with their homie in the coffin, which kind of encapsulates that thinking of you don't always have to be gangster, you don't have to always be hardcore. There's a softer side, a human side to everyone as well. So they go through all these real emotions, and that's another thing that hip hop encapsulates. It's supposed to capture all the different emotions. It's not just when you're on the street and you got to be tough for all your boys, but when you lose people too, or when you fall in love, or when you go on vacation, all these different emotions that humans go through. No one is just one dimensional, as T.I. once said on the track with Young Thug. But yeah, like going back to the album, just he addressed a lot of speculation about his relationships and how people, he started wearing crochet pants, and he addressed that. And then he said, I think it was on the corner where he said, they said that I was whack because I was wearing crochet pants, but now I'm back. And he talked about these things direct on. He even talked about things from the past, about when he left college. He went to HBCU in Louisiana, I believe. And when he came home from college to Chicago, he said everything was the same. Nothing really moved. And he realized at that point that, he has to keep moving because, he had to go back, pay student loans, do all these different things. And he had to get out and make money and be successful regardless of, him coming home from college and not completing that mission. So he did talk about a lot of things. Like I said, he talked about being from Chicago a lot, losing friends, even the song Faithful, when he compares being in a relationship to a woman. But he was like, what if that woman was, God? How would he treat her? Would he treat her any different? So like I said, there's a lot of conscious rap on this album, but it does a lot. It did a lot for me as far as being a hip hop fan and a consumer of music. I looked at music a lot different than I had ever been looking at it before. Because like I said, I was only getting that one dimension. But when I started listening to Common's Beat and Lupe's Fiasco's Food and Liquor, I started getting a different perspective on hip hop and started becoming a pure fan, so to speak. But ironically, this is probably the Common B album is probably his most commercial album. But none of the songs were too commercial. Maybe the one song "Testify" that he had that had Taraji P Henson in the video, maybe that song hit kind of commercial. But as far as the rapping goes, it was like it didn't seem like he had to sell out to make this album, but it was still successful, if that makes sense. And um, even when he came out with the album Finding Forever after this album, with Kanye producing most of it, with the exception of a couple of tracks, it was very good rapping, but it seemed like he didn't have to sell out to make that album or go left like he did on Electric Circus. And he had the Universal Mind Control song later on that some could put in that light. But I think as an artist, sometimes you want to just venture out into different music. And since there are really no mixtapes anymore, there's not a lot of room for putting out these projects for experimentation. And now you can put out these albums and kind of experiment with it that way. Like you don't have that benefit of mixtapes anymore. But nevertheless, it was a very great album. It's in my top 5 of hip hop albums of all time. I know most people won't think that, but it's all subjective, and that's just the way I feel about it. And just thanks for tuning in, and until next time, I'll see you next time.